If you're moving overseas and you're still going to be working, earning an income, even if it's overseas, you still have an obligation to tell the Australian ATO what your worldwide income is for HECS debt repayment or help debt repayment purposes. So a few years ago, it's maybe 3-4 years ago, I'm not sure. Someone in the comments might be able to correct me. The government brought in some rules where even if you were working overseas, you had an obligation to lodge an income update. Think of it like a simplified tax return here in Australia, not to have to pay tax in Australia, but to alert the government to what your worldwide income is, so that you have to repay HECS. So what used to happen is a lot of Australians would go through university here, they'd do their finance course or their legal or whatever it was, they'd go overseas and get a job in banking or law in the UK. Lots of Aussie expats in the UK earning far more money for jobs over there than what they were here, but they were no longer Australian tax residents, so they were no longer lodging Australian tax returns, didn't have assessable income here in Australia, and as a result didn't have to repay their HECS or help debts. There's whole generations of people that didn't have to do it. Now, as I said a few years ago, the rules around that changed. All these people had to start lodging tax returns. One of my clients, who's a lawyer working for a big global law firm, but working in London, she was actually saving up to buy a flat in London, and these rules changed. Her and all of her buddies, her Aussie buddies that were over there, had to lodge not tax returns, but had to lodge this notice back here in Australia of their income, and had these huge HECS bills. So a lot of these lawyers that back then, what am I, 38 now, so they all would have been kind of early to mid 30s, earning squillions. They effectively, most of them ended up having to pay their HECS debts or help debts back in one go, because their incomes were so high. They ended up having to pay the whole lot back in one go, as I said. So if you are going overseas, it may be simpler and easier for you to just, if you can afford to just pay off your HECS or help debt before you go, particularly if you're going to be working. That way you won't have to worry about the indexation, this high indexation that will likely happen in June, and you won't have to worry about reporting your worldwide income back to Australia for the purposes of repaying that debt. So it might be a little bit easier for you. Now, if you're going overseas and you're not going to be working, you're going to have a really low income, maybe a different story. But if you are going over for a proper full-time career type job, decent income, then it might be worthwhile just getting rid of it before you go.